Hi, everyone. Welcome back. It's November already. We're not quite sure where the time's gone, but we are so happy to be here with Stephanie Howell. She's amazing. We read through her book, Control the Chaos, and so many practical takeaway ideas that people can take to their classroom tomorrow. And I even made a comment that as a parent, it's going to help me be a better parent and helping my own children with executive functioning skills and really thinking about what needs to be taught. So, Stephanie, you have done so many things over the years. Will you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about where you are now and what you've done since you've been in education?
Yeah, of course. So I first started off as an intervention specialist. And my room was a little bit chaotic because I had all different students from different backgrounds, different disabilities. And I was a fifth grade teacher, and I was trying to get my students to perform at those fifth grade standards. And what I found is some of my students would come at a kindergarten, first grade, third grade level. And the state of Ohio was like, no, you've got to get them to that fifth grade level. And so there was just all of these gaps. And I was just really struggling as a teacher. And I felt like I cared more than my kids. I don't know if any of you have felt that way. Like, I care way more than you do about this test on Friday. And I don't know why I'm not sleeping and you're sleeping great. So that was just kind of the classroom that I kind of had and just really struggled with that student ownership, having students care about their learning. And so I started to research and dive into executive functioning, and it started to change my own classroom. And then after a couple years, I became an instructional coach. And I realized I wasn't the only one with chaos. I wasn't the only one that was dealing with students who were just struggling with time management or prioritizing or being organized. And so what we started to realize is that this was an issue across our entire district. And so I teamed up with Tara, who's the co-author of the book, and we started to help different teachers with executive functioning skills in their classroom. We had this time set out during the school day for our teachers where they were able to have morning meetings. And a lot of our teachers would do executive functioning skills with the students about 3 out of the 5 days that week. And we started to see a lot of improvements. We were a district that wanted to use personalized learning and blended learning. And a lot of teachers were going back to direct instruction because of the behaviors that they were seeing in their classroom. And so rather than just kind of being like, well, why aren't you doing this? We went to that root cause and we really started to see that students didn't have the skills in order to do blended or personalized learning in the classroom. They didn't have the skills to look at a project and break it down into little steps to say, oh, this is due by Friday. I need to do this, this, and this by these dates in order to meet that deadline. There was just little things that teachers could do in their classroom that allowed our students to be really successful. They started to take ownership of their learning, where we used iReady as our diagnostic, and a lot of students grew 1 to 2 grade levels just through December until the end of the year from that midterm test. So again, it was just really exciting to see the transformation just change within students, and just being able to support all of the different students and their needs. And we gave a assessment on different executive functioning skills to see where our students were lacking and who needed more help. If we could have students lead sessions, so if we had a student that was really organized, if they could kind of take that leadership role and teach some organizational skills to students. So again, it was just a fun activity, but it was also a really lengthy process just to teach teachers, because adults, we struggle with executive functioning too. So some of my teachers were not organized or weren't maybe able to prioritize time, or they weren't able to work on flexibility if the schedule had to change. We were really able to start pointing it out in our adults and changing instruction that way too.
I think this is an awesome topic for every aged kid. We've talked with Dayna about the littles and how do you get them to take chunks on a big whole project, all the way up through my kids that are, some of them are getting ready to go to college and still It is definitely a learned skill. It is definitely a skill you have to practice. And it is definitely, I would think, K to 12, a skill that ebbs and flows as their brain development ebbs and flows.
So when we were looking at Stephanie's book and breaking these down, and when you look up executive functioning skills, there's some that list 10 or 12. So we pulled out the 7 that Stephanie talked about and the 7 that seem to be most common as we're thinking about this. And I will tell you, as a teacher of more than 20 years, I'm looking at this thinking, oh man, how many times have I planned a lesson and I haven't even thought about all of these skills that my kids need in order to be successful? We know that the curriculum's really rigorous, and we know that we have this set amount of time and we feel rushed with what we're doing. And so many times we forget that the success of the assignment or the project is directly linked to these skills. And I love the story that you told, Stephanie. It sounds like, you were really powerful for your district and for the other teachers and for the students. But I love that you said it takes time. Like something like this doesn't happen overnight. And it's really being patient with kids, but also knowing like, hey, I sometimes struggle with planning or managing a calendar or to-do list. Like, of course, kids are going to struggle with those things. So as you kind of took this journey, what were some of the small steps? Because of course, this big picture, you can see, a huge influence, I'm sure, across grade levels, across student populations. But what were some small steps? If we wanted our listeners to take some small steps in their classroom tomorrow, what would you recommend?
Yeah. And I think it's really important to note that when I was in the lunchroom with teachers or in the teaching lounge, they didn't always say, well, my student's really struggling with verbal working memory, or my student really isn't self-aware, right? I was hearing words like lazy. This student is stubborn. This student's really messy, disruptive, maybe unmotivated, forgetful. I was hearing these really negative terms that teachers would use to describe certain students in their class. Mm-hmm. And what happened is we were able to kind of take some of those terms, and they actually line up with an executive functioning skill that's kind of on the board up here on the screen. And so, for example, my son, he's 5 years old, very stubborn. AJ is the stubbornest child I know. He's a little me. It's kind of sad. And so with AJ, I'm like, oh, he's stubborn. And what I was realizing is when teachers use those words, it was very fixed mindset where I'm like, oh, I can't fix him. He's always going to be stubborn. That student's always going to be unmotivated. That student's always going to be disruptive. And so what happens though is if you look at it from an executive functioning side, so again, stubborn, it aligns with goal setting, flexibility. Those are skills that I can work with him on. That's where my mindset started to switch, is I started to hear all of these teachers, including myself, this kid is that, this kid is that. But when we're able to view it from an executive functioning skill, then we can say, oh, these are skills. These are things I can do in my classroom to support the project or whatever I need to do to help that child. And so, for example, with AJ, who's stubborn, one of his things is goal directed. He loves when I can set up goals because he likes to check them off of his list. And so, for example, if I'm like, AJ, go clean your room, my 5-year-old is not going to go clean his room. But with AJ, if I can say, AJ, go clean up the clothes off your floor. He goes and does it. He comes back for me for positive praise. Now I need you to clean up your toys that are up on the side of the right-hand side or wherever they are. He goes and does that little task. Go put your clothes in the hamper. He does that little task, and he keeps taking those little chunks, and we're able to get to our goal of cleaning the room. It wasn't as overwhelming when it was like, go clean your room, to those little chunks. And so it's little things like that that can make a lot of a difference for some of our kids. So for example, if we had a project, I've heard teachers that are like, the book trailer is due by Friday. But for some kids, they don't even know where to get started. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we need to break down some of those skills and some of those activities into smaller bite-sized pieces to really support those students in our class. And then hopefully we can teach them to start building out those plans of, okay, here, this is due by this date. What are you going to do, right? We need to teach them those skills as well instead of continuously spoon feeding them. But again, that was kind of my realization was one, teachers didn't know what those issues in their classroom of lazy, stubborn, unmotivated, forgetful could actually be fixed by some of the different executive functioning skills if they would place them into their classroom.
It's so interesting because today in class, my freshmen are really struggling with how to prepare for their quizzes in Project Lead the Way. They're doing really good on projects now. You know, as many years as I've taught it, I've gotten smart enough to bite size it. Mm-hmm. But I have used over and over the language that, guys, we need to be studying every night. And I just say that. And then I don't know why today, I guess I inside knew you were coming today. And I thought, maybe they don't even know what that means. And so, you know, being able to look at them today and say, okay, well, today we learned about mitosis. Tonight, you're giving me 15 minutes. You're studying these steps. And here are some things that you can use to prep it. And I love that breakdown of the little bites. And your analogy of your 5-year-old, it just totally changes my mindset on a lot of things. And I can't imagine how valuable to so many teachers, because to us, we already, as teachers, you know, we have to prep out and step by step, but kids just don't intrinsically know that. We had to learn that. Somebody guided us. And so that is a really very useful point about how are we going to guide them to learn how to chunk it up? Because in actuality, our goal is to prepare them for what happens after 12th grade. And so that's a skill we can give them by the time they leave us. Then we've prepared them for what comes next.
Well, what I'm thinking over here on that primary level is I'm thinking, okay, wow, I'm not thinking about how overwhelming things are to them. You know, that's a lot, right? And just like your test analogy, preparing for that test, that's overwhelming. And so I like how you're suggesting you break it down into smaller increments or chunks. And at the primary level, even if it's a picture, right? Several different pictures that lead up to the final project being completed. So nice. I love that.
I love it. Here's what I thought of when you were talking about AJ and overwhelming to clean their room. I mean, let's reflect as an adult. If somebody said, go clean the house right now, I'd be like, like, where do you even get started? But if somebody said, hey, Karisa, all you have to do is clean the bathroom today, I'd be like, okay, that's doable. I mean, think about how we feel as adults as well. This conversation is going to help me be more mindful and really try to reflect on those things and not take for granted that they have all of this mastered at any level, to be honest.
Right.
And we're talking kids that are completely functional in the gen ed setting to kids that are multilingual learners to special education students. I mean, the supports that are really great for every kid.
Yeah, for sure. And so I think just some other strategies that I've used with teachers as well is we want to teach them throughout the lesson. So again, like if you have a project coming, taking those bite-sized pieces, having an agenda can also be really helpful of what to expect for the day. If you have a student that does struggle with flexibility, maybe telling them ahead of time, hey, this schedule is going to change, or I'm going to have a sub out, can also be helpful, but they also need to kind of learn some of that flexibility too. And so lots of games can help with executive functioning and supporting your students with that. But then we also took during those morning meetings, they were 15 minutes total. And so we tried to plan like 10 minutes because you always know it's going to go over. And so with those 10 minutes, we would really focus in on just different executive functioning skills. So if it was maybe working memory, we would maybe have a list of different things that the students had to memorize and do different activities to really build up those skills. If we were working with organization, they actually cleaned out their desk or their book bag. Yes, we did find an old sandwich from like the start of the year, and it was probably the end of the year. It was nasty. Like you're going to find those different nasty things, but if you put in time, hey, clean up your folder, put this in your purple folder right now. Like you keep reminding those students, then it's going to be a little bit easier. We also had to think about digital organization. And so with their Google Drive, you know, is everything organized or is it a hot mess? Teaching also thinking about grade levels. If you're working with a younger student, you might have them kind of use a paper to-do list or different activities where as they get older, we might start teaching them how to use Google Calendar. And so again, thinking about different age groups, thinking about the progression that you might use in different scaffolds based on what they need. It's still a visual. If I don't have my Google Calendar, I'm lost. Like if my calendar goes away, I am screwed for the day because every meeting is on there. That's my visual schedule to help me with time management, to help with planning and prioritizing. But some of our littles, they might not be ready for that. And so having like a to-do list, or I've even seen Velcro where they'll like say, this is done, this is not done, where there's visible schedules. So again, it can look very different depending on the grade level. And I think that's just an important note to think about. Figure out what grade you teach or who you work with and what's going to work for your students, because it might look different based on other classrooms, but students need those different scaffolds to be successful.
And you know, one thing that I like that you said is using that morning meeting time to address some of those issues, but also something on our list here as we go into some ideas that Magic School has given us is with brain breaks. Oh my goodness. It doesn't have to just be a go noodle or a dance, right? Like a brain break can be an awesome time to teach some of those functions, right? Like how do we organize? Maybe let's take this time to play a quick memory game within, you know, as a class or in groups. So, and it's just taking that 5 minutes that you would for a brain break in order to build those same functions.
I love that idea. And we were talking just a few minutes before the show with Stephanie, and her book was published in 2022. And I said, you know, AI obviously had been being used, but it was not at the forefront of everything like it is now. And I said, who would have thought how AI could help assist us as educators and help assist students with these executive functioning skills? So I quickly got on Magic School and typed up that we were looking for some ways to support students in each of the areas. And it's, you know, this was a 10-second process, and I can go through and look quickly and say, oh yeah, I could use a template for this. I need to break things down into better steps. I need to give explicit due dates for pieces of things that are due. I just love this. And, you know, you can tweak it and have a conversation with AI about it. And maybe there's something you're hearing. Maybe you're hearing a teacher say, or you feel like you have a student that's lacking motivation or is lazy. You could type in some of that language and say, you know, which executive functioning skill do I need to hit here, and give me some support for that. I love this, and I love how we can leverage AI to help with that as well.
One of the things that I got from your book that I was like, yes, is even as teachers, we have to think about us, and we have issues with these same executive functions, right? We are not being flexible. We are not showing growth mindset on our end, even though we're pushing it on our students. And we're being afraid to try something new. We've been talking a lot about AI, but we have people who didn't even know, they haven't even tried an AI tool. They haven't tried Magic School or ChatGPT or any of the tools. They haven't even dove into something like that because they're afraid to. So I think that us as teachers, when we try something new, we're showing our students, hey, it's okay to try. It's okay to make mistakes. Because that's how we're going to learn. We may not like our results, or we might not do great the first time. Even as a teacher, I might not. I don't have to know everything as a teacher to move forward on an activity or a project, because I can learn right along with my students. Or if I feel like I have to be right all the time as a teacher, then it's teaching them, hey, you can't be wrong. That's hard to move forward.
And I don't think it's a sign of weakness to say that. that we're human, that we mess up, that we don't know everything. There's a lot of things kids ask me in class because, I teach an anatomy and physiology class. And I just look up and say, I don't know, but let's ask the Googler. Let's see what's out there. Let's learn a little more. And I think that flexibility as well, Dayna, like you're saying, that let's take this in a different direction. A kid has sparked an idea, and us having flexibility. I think holding that rigorous classroom that's the same classroom every single year, no matter what your clientele is or how the dynamics of your children learn, I think it's a big mistake as teachers. And I think that's where kids lose their joy in learning in the classroom if they don't feel like we're on a journey together.
Yeah, and building that classroom culture is huge because we have to have those relationships. If we don't know what our students are struggling with or what they need help with, then we're going to really struggle. And it's also really important to create that psychological safe space for kids to speak up and say, Miss Howe, I know you said this project's due Friday, but I just need some help. I need help creating a plan, or what do you mean by that? And creating that metacognition too, when it comes to building that classroom community where students feel okay to fail forward and they feel it's okay to try new things, because that's what it's about. But it does take time to build that community as well, and being able to have them learn how to, disagree with somebody in their classroom, but in a respectful way too.
Well, and I think it's also interesting, in order to help kids with their project and project-based learning, we have to be open as teachers to say, oh, you know what? I never even thought about going that direction, or I didn't even think about that. That happened to me today. I never even thought about how you did that math problem. I would never have done it that way, but you are correct. You did it correctly. Also, the other day, I asked all my kids to get on Epic to research something that we were doing. And then a student came to me and said, you know what, could I get on Magic School and go into our room and just talk to the giraffe instead? And I was like, yeah, just do that. Because I didn't push for the direction I was thinking, okay, I already reserved these books at their reading level, but this student wanted to kind of do it a different way. And I was like, you're still completing the task. And I have to be flexible with that. I don't have to be demanding. I need to be flexible with the situation so I still get the results that I want.
All right. So as we wrap this up, we can't thank you enough for coming to visit with us. We grow so much from our visitors. We're kind of on this visitor thing. We really appreciate what you offered today to all of us and to our humongous audience out there. Next month, we are doing Yay for PLTW. I'm really excited about this one. All three of us have experience teaching PLTW, K to 12. And our special guest is AJ McAdams, who is an original cohort member of PLTW Biomedical Sciences. He was in the first group of teachers ever trained. And he's done biomedical science at 3 different schools. But what is really, I think, going to bring a lot to our conversation is at the last 2 schools, he has implemented K to 12 biomed, seeing that there was definitely a value to not only putting it through the middle school as a feeder into his program, but what you can get from a K to 5 classroom. So we're excited for that. That'll be our last one of the year.
And as you can see, yay for our season 3. Oh my goodness. We've gotten to visit with so many great people. You can revisit those in YouTube, but also coming up, we've got John Spencer, Jen Gonzalez. We've got Jenny Long from Magic School, Andy Knieven, who is now with Canva. So we are so excited for the rest of our season. Please tune in and join us on the second Monday of every month and share in the learning with us. We get to offer a Control the Chaos book for one lucky person who gives us feedback. So please give us feedback and we will send a book your way if you are the lucky draw. So hopefully you would want to connect with us in the future. Here's our contact and we look forward to that opportunity. Thanks, Stephanie. YaySTEM!
YaySTEM!
Thanks, Stephanie. This is great.
Yeah, thanks, guys.